Welcome back to the Real Coaching Podcast. I'm Joe Filliol, and today joined by Matt Bottrill of Matt Bottrill Performance Coaching, who is a bike fitter, is involved in aerodynamics, testing and fitting a number of world-class triathletes as well as cyclists in his long history. We talk about his process involving how to optimize position, efficiency, developing race plans, Matt's drills that he uses to incorporate the bike fit into training and optimization of race performance based on the demands of the courses. We talk about some of the history of bike fitting, some of the myths, some of the trends. We talk about shoe design, short cranks, saddles, front ends, helmets, and how he has gone about putting together his view and his process for bike fitting that supported and influenced really so much in triathlon in recent years. It's a great conversation, and Matt and I were fortunate to connect through a number of my own athletes that he's fit. And then more recently, we went with Vincent Luis to the Silverstone Wind Tunnel to connect the fit that Matt had done with Vince to finding some gains and optimizations in the tunnel, and then ongoing support through Vince's long course racing this year. So it's great discussion. Really enjoyed it. I got a chance to ask a number of questions that I was interested in, as well as going deep into some of the areas where there's really a lot of myths. There's a lot of hype around bike fitting as it's exploded with availability of the tools that many are using, and how Matt has seen all that. So a reminder, you can support the podcast, future episodes, sign up on Substack. You can watch and comment on either YouTube or audio, and also available as a way to support sharing this work is one-to-one coaching with myself, either consulting, full-on coaching, and also potential to support coaches in their journey into high-performance coaching. And you can also join me CAPS in person, get in contact to support the podcast, and now onward with the conversation with Matt. So Matt, your normal location is Colville, UK, I believe, just outside of Loughborough, Leicester. But you're out in Boulder now. So what are you doing out in Boulder?
Trying to escape everybody, to be honest. It's been pretty insane in Colville for the last few months. Trying to get athletes, like more efficient, faster. We've had the launch of the new Giant Trinity, so it's all been pretty manic. So yeah, I've been coming to Boulder since 2016. I've got a lot of friends out here, obviously that we've worked with in the past, and but I just love the place itself. I'm trying to get myself fit. I've got Leadville 100 mountain bike event coming up in a few months. But he's just trying to escape. Like, I'm on the top of the mountain. On Lee Hill, for those people that know Boulder itself. So I'm at 6,500 feet, trying to get some altitude acclimation, ready to come back and put some miles in when I get back.
Leadville mountain bike. Is it mountain bike the 100 mile? What bike do you use for that?
Yeah, well, I'm going all in, mate. I'm going to do a Keegan Swinson special with a drop handlebar, because obviously
Right.
you say it's a mountain bike event, but realistically, I think it's technical in places. Whether the people from the UK would call it as technical, I'm not sure. It looks, but it's kind of like aerodynamics. And the biggest thing that you do notice at altitude is like rolling resistance is quite key, and obviously aero. So. But obviously, the downside of being at altitude, especially at 10,000 feet, is power doesn't come very naturally. So
Right.
I'm thinking if I can absorb, all those efficient parts, then I can do a good time. My goal ultimately is I want to try and break 7 hours, which is yeah, it's quite a big task really. So, but I love having these goals. Like normally you're trying to help athletes achieve like their goals. But I've been an athlete myself from the age of 12, so I love having like these specific things that I'm working towards. Really, I can't let it go. But I never want to really repeat history. I've done everything in time trialing, and I'd love to have done triathlon, but that just takes up like way too much time. Uh, but yeah, it'd be nice to do something.
So you alluded to it before, but you're a pretty in-demand bike fitter these days. You have a quite a wait list, I think. So you're trying to balance your own training and it also obviously engaging with athletes on a daily basis and all kinds of interesting projects at home there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's good to like. I find that riding the bike and it just gives me. I need headspace. Do you know what I mean? That's why I'll always take myself out of it because I could work 7 days a week. I could be doing three, four bike fits every day if I wanted to. And I can't keep up with the demand. You know what I mean? A lot of the time, I'm having to fix a lot of the problems. Like people have gone for bike fits, they've not got out what they wanted, or that they'll get injured, and then and that my goal is that everybody that walks through the door, I try and become them, for that 2 to 3 hours. But mentally, that takes a lot out of me. Anyone can, well, I'd like to think that anyone can set like a saddle height, but realistically, it's a bit more complicated. That you're trying to interact the athlete into the machine, and then you're trying to think of demands of the events that they're working towards. Uh, that kind of comes quite natural to me. I had a lot of success, but to get that success, I had to fail a lot of times and make a lot of mistakes. Like people see me, like 10 to 15 years ago, it wasn't the position that everybody, they got to see, and you get to see the wins, but you don't get to see the journey that it takes to get there.
For sure. I mean, it's a lot. I suppose a lot like coaching. You've done a lot of reps to build your experience, and I mean, you're also doing coaching as well. I mean, I think it seemed like a real integrated program you've got there with your company and
Yeah, no,
fitting.
totally. Like my role has changed quite a bit now. Like when I first started the coaching company, it was predominantly coaching, and I do like the bike
Mm,
fit alongside of that. Uh, but now I coach 8 athletes now. I don't coach any professionals. I generally work with other coaches that are working with the pros. It's kind of I've had a lot of success. Like in the past, like people like Tim O'Donnell, Tim Don. I've kind, that they were athletes I had a lot of success out of, and I think I was probably the first person that came into the sport outside of cycling in 2016. And I remember working with Tim. He was, I think, at 37 at that age, and we started looking at things in a totally different way. 'Cause I think a lot of people think that all this aerodynamic stuff has been around in the last couple of years, but in triathlon, I definitely think that we brought it in 2016, and we innovated a lot of it. 'Cause I don't think social media was quite as important back then as it is now. So, but yeah, and it's kind of for me. I started this at the age of 12. It took me till the age of 36 to kind of find out, meeting the right people that made me understand like aero. That was back in 2010. I wanted to be like national champion, and I kept getting beat. Aero, wind tunnels, and all this stuff. Power meters started to come into it, and it was just like aligning all those metrics really.
mm.
And that's what I love doing, and that's why I love. Like my speciality, it's like working with, like somebody like yourself, like we've worked with different athletes to, help them on the journey. Because I don't think that one person's got all the answers. Like if you work in a team, you can always get the best out of each person a lot of the time. Because it's so complicated, all these little things. It'd be like me going, I'm going to be a swim coach now. Go and watching a few YouTube videos, go and watch a few people swim, and then I start giving swim sessions. Like getting the swim sessions is quite easy. there's millions been written, but do you know what you're doing with those things? Probably not.
Mm.
And that's why, my role has changed. And I've built a team around me of coaches that can take on that side of it. And I can just put myself into like the bike fitting, because it's not, I don't think it's fair that, I can be working from 8 o'clock till 6, 7 o'clock at night some days. And if I've got an athlete that wants me, I can't be there. Do you know what I mean? But the people that I've got, that I'm working with now, they've been with me for so long that they kind of, if they need me urgently, then they'll send me a message, and I'll text them back. But generally, people just crack on, and I speak to them, and I feed back to them like every day. I'm very involved with like what they're doing, but it's not the same as, like somebody like yourself. You're very hands on. You're analysing like every bit of the data, and understanding them,
Mm.
because you've got the metrics of, like the training they're doing, but I think there's a lot of psychological aspect of it that goes with it as well, isn't there? Like the mental state and all of that type of stuff.
Definitely, yeah. So your journey into bike fitting and aerodynamics was from your own needs. From you were describing, you're getting beaten in time trials. So maybe to walk through for people that don't know your transition into this space.
Yeah, so like I've obviously, I have ridden from the age of 12. I was junior national champion. Then I was pretty talented pretty early on. I evolved to be part of like when lottery funding first came into the world class performance program. So I was actually riding for, like Great Britain. I did that for a couple of years. I was at the same time as like Bradley Wiggins. I was a little bit older than him. Uh, but I was talented, but I was never going to make it as a professional. And when I mean professional, I mean like world tour. I don't mean, I could quite easily done it in like the UK and probably gone and raced in, Division Two. But that wasn't what my goal was. I wanted to be, uh, my goal was always to be like a national champion. And I kind of, well, the biggest thing that I did when I was racing abroad is I didn't like being away from home a lot. With cycling back in the day, you would have to go and live in France, Belgium, wherever. You couldn't come home, and that kind of wasn't for me. And then I just started on a journey, and then I was predominantly road racing, but I was always better at TT. And then I was like, right, I want to be the best at this. But for about 10 years, I was always like second to, I'd never finished lower than fourth. It was like second, fourth. It was like consistent. And it came to like 2010, and we just had the birth of like my first child. And I remember thinking, uh, yeah, I need to win the national championship. I was a postman. I needed to earn like more money, so I was like, if I could win the nationals, and I'll get more sponsorship. And so I thought, right, I'm going to just train my ass off for this national, and I ended up coming third again. But I actually got beat by a guy called Mark Alton. He'd never beaten me. I was like, I was like, how can this even happen? And I started looking. He got a power meter. He'd been to the wind tunnel. But at that time, like I'm a postman, I'm thinking, I was earning like 20 grand a year. I didn't have access to buying a power meter, and or definitely not going to the wind tunnel. So I basically wrote some letters. We used to have to write back in the day. It wasn't a matter of yeah, so I wrote some letters to a guy called Bob Tobin at Cycle Power Meters, and just said, "Look,
Mm.
mate, I really want to win the nationals. Would you consider supporting me?" And he basically he loaned me a power meter, and then I got the power meter, and I was like, "Oh, I don't even know, just fluctuating all these numbers. I didn't know what to do with it." And I said, "Would you coach me?" And he agreed to do that. And he was very invested in like what I was doing then. He just said to me, "Look, we really need to get to the winter." And I was like, "Bob, that's never going to happen. I can't afford it." And one of my best friends, he owned his own paint and decorating business, and he just said, "Look, I'll fund you going to the wind tunnel." And that's how I got to meet Simon Smart at Drag 20. And we just hit it off like straight away. Then fortunately, the following year, I ended up riding for Drag 20. Then they supported me, gave me the contacts to people like Envy and Giant, and it just everything started to align from like that point. And then within the next year, I was like second at the British Time Trial Championships. I'd started to win the nationals, and this is like, this is where like all the world tour pros they ride, and I ended up beating a lot of the people that rode for like Sky at the time, and just Alex Dowsett beat me by like 15 seconds, and for it was always that's when the name of the Flying Postman it kind of came from there, and yeah, I was the journey really started from that point. And then by 2014, I was pretty much indestructible. I won everything from that point. And but then I started to realise by the end of that season that I'd I'd broken competition records. You've won everything, like you've waited all your life. And I thought, right, my journey needs to go into something else now, and that's when the coaching started. And it was I wasn't really looking to be a coach, uh, but what happened to me? I used to write these articles for like Giant, and a guy called Tim O'Brack messaged me, and he was a triathlete. He wanted to win Ironman Roth, and I had no clue what Roth was. You know what I mean? I knew it was an Ironman, but I was like, to me, it was just like a normal little event. And he just said to me, "Would you coach me?" I said, "Well, I'm not trying to be a coach, but give me a training. I'll have a look at it." And I said, "Mate, you don't do any intervals. I reckon I can help you with it." Looked at the demands of the event, started setting him intervals, thinking of how rolling the course was. Started thinking about like aerodynamics and just aligned like these two elements. He already had the endurance, and ultimately what it allowed him to do was run off the bike like efficiently, and that was my first person I'd ever coached, and he won one of the biggest Ironman races. But and I only worked with him on the bike, and that's all I ever have done with athletes. If I only ever coached them on the bike, then I worked with other people, and then I just started to coach a couple of mates. They started winning races. And then at the end of the year, I just won the national 10-mile time trial. So, and I did it in the fastest time that had ever been done. It was like 17:40, which was 34 miles an hour. And I said that, well, I actually did this on 8 hours training, and I launched the coaching company. It wasn't lying. It was just, I'm not, I had three kids at that point. I was at a full-time job, and that's all I had to train 8 hours, but it was evil training. I never want to go back to that place. And then I just thought, well, I've got this formula now. Like, if I can align, you know, understanding people and the training and aerodynamics and biomechanics through the bike, then I've got a formula that nobody else has got. And I launched a team, so I launched the coaching company, and I launched like my own team, and everybody just started winning stuff. So it was, it just escalated really.
Mm. So in large part, is I mean really based on, as you say, your own experiences in I suppose both from there's a training point of view. It's quite interesting there. You've found an efficient way to train. I mean, maybe expand on that a little bit. In the 8 hours a week, how did that evolve?
Yeah, it was just like it was always like I couldn't handle like a lot of training anyway. Like I needed high intensity was the way that I used to be able to get fit. Like a lot of sweet spot training, which is like a swear word now, which still fascinates me. That it's like like you look at triathletes talk about sweet spot. Well, you ever thought that that's where you spend like like when you race for like 2 hours to do Ironman, you're actually in the zone. So. Uh, but that it was maximising time because there's so many ways of getting training stress, isn't there? You can do like a periodization in training model, pyramid model, whatever you want to call it. But ultimately, it's getting training load in, and there's a number of ways of doing that. And then and what I learned that was how I used to get fit, and then I'd always build into like the races because like you start doing a lot of VO2 max stuff, and that mentally and psycho, I couldn't do that every week, but if I had this basis of a lot of like tempo riding, sweet spot, and some threshold work, then I'd start to bring my racing into it. Then when I wanted to peak, like I always hit the best power numbers when it came to the national championship. We'd start to bring in like the VO2 max stuff, but and they were just classic stuff like like 4x4s, 5x5, 1 minute maxes, nothing like ridiculous, but it always it got me fit, and then and the biggest art was then thinking of the demands of the event. Was it hilly? Was it flat? How do we utilize like the position on like the course? And that's what I brought into like the training element, because you generally find that when I first started the company, I wasn't coaching professionals. That took about a year and a half. That most people, the time restricted, they've got between like 8 and 12 hours realistically. Obviously, for triathlon, that, and I wasn't coaching in triathlon at that point. It was mainly just cyclists. That, like it's quite a it's quite a good amount. Like if you capitalize like on that training, you're gonna get quite a lot from it. uh, and that's what I've been able to do in a lot. I just to think how many national championships we've coached, and the amount of people that we've, especially in CT, that we've helped to kind of, ride like personal best. And then it was the same when I went into, I started coaching Tim Don. I just couldn't believe it was like this old model of training, and I was like, man, it's not about the hours that you do. You need those hours. We all know that you need long endurance rides, but you've got to start thinking of the demands of the event and how you utilize the position like out on like the course. And uh, and for me, like a lot of that, it was just simple stuff. It didn't have to be complicated. There's nothing wrong in going like you're going to do like 3 by 20 today, 70.3 pace, Ironman pace. You know what I mean? It hasn't got to be uh, you know it hasn't got to be like ridiculous. And that's always, for me, that's always been what I've looked at, because I haven't got no sports science degree. I, everything that I've learned is through putting it through myself and giving it to athletes. I couldn't tell you how the body adapts to like all the training, but like somebody like you've got a sports science. I haven't got any of that. It's kind of like, but I understand. I understand the demands of the event, and I've got like this approach that I just look at all the elements of it, and I'd love to. I wish somebody could plug themselves into my brain, and I could give that information out to a few people.
No,
Yeah,
well, what you say makes sense. I mean, there are so many things that we could do in training, but to filter them through what actually is that like to implement? Well, what is it, in terms of your experience, what is it like to do different kinds of intervals? I mean, you've, as you say, filtered that through yourself, and
yeah.
you've experienced it, and then of course you've grown since by
Yeah, and
working with
totally.
others.
Then your confidence grows, doesn't it? You start getting success out of people, uh, and then it's like, okay, well, there must be something into this. It's like when I coached Tim Don. He ended up, we got him to the point he broke Ironman world record. So we did pretty well. Yeah.
Mm.
So, but I didn't have like this crystal ball. I knew how to ramp and load training up, and I knew that pacing was like a critical part to running off the bike like efficiently. I thought ultimately, and everybody listening to this is, it's not about how much power you've got. It's about how fast you travel for the speed. And ultimately, if you can save power, if you're traffic, you can run off the bike like more efficiently, because you utilize like less energy. And it's not rocket science. But I think a lot of people, they just focus so much on the training element. They don't think about like not even marginal gains for most people. They're like, if you can save like 10 watts over an Ironman, well, there you go. There's 4 to 5 minutes. And that's what I was able to do when I first came into it. You imagine shaving 15 minutes off a professional's bike ride time. It's like it blew everybody's mind. And that's what we're seeing today. Like everybody's just kind of caught up, isn't they? Like uh, this, everybody's trying to think of, especially at world class level, they're trying to think of this.
Hmm. So
So,
you're talking about taking time off. So and not only focusing on training, but maybe walk us through this speed versus power thing. Obviously, the point that many people focus on is, well, their power output. But you're talking, it's actually important to go as fast as you can. I mean, the speed is in the
yeah,
finish time. So how do
yeah.
you
So
think about
say,
that? Yeah.
yeah, it's like, well, ultimately, say, I don't know, we take, I don't know, let's just focus on 300 watts. We've got 300 watts today. We're doing this event, and well, the first process around that is you want to look at the demands of the event. Like, is it out and back? Is it rolling? Is it? is it a circle configuration of, like a different route? Because and then what we know about the course is you're going to get head and tailwind, and you're going to get hills and downhills generally, unless it's on like an oval state circuit like Daytona. It's just, uh, but what you've got to know then is, so we've got this 300 watts. Well, how do you utilize it? So into the headwind, then you need to push more power. This is if you want to go as fast as you can, like on like the bike.
Mhm.
You're not drafting, because if the stronger the runner you are, the more you want to draft. So legally. But yeah, so if you've got 300 watts, then into the headwind, you want to push more power. You probably want to go like 310, 320. You want to put more power into that. And when it comes to the tailwind section, then that's when you utilize like aero more. You want to save energy. But a lot of people think that going into the headwind, you need the best aerodynamic position. But if like you're closing off your hip angle, you're just not going to be able to generate aero and power together. It's just it just doesn't come. So you always got to think about pushing to the headwind, and then into the tailwinds, you utilize like aerodynamic, and you need to know what that position is. So if you've had a successful bike fit, that person is going to tell you you've got three positions that you can utilize. That's what I always work on. You've got heads high, get me to the bloody finish, or I'm going to climb. You got a medium position, and that's what we can, we're going to push into the headwinds. We can hold for probably 70 to 80% of the race. Then we've got ultra aero, that when we're going downhill or we're into a tailwind, that we utilize that position. And that's what you're trying to bring onto the course. Then if you go uphill, where a lot of people go wrong is that they just redline it too much. And what they do is they get to the crest of the hill and they don't lay the power over the top. They get to the top, think that they've done, and then head comes up, shoulders come up, and the speed will drop. But if you want to be successful, you need to you can have a red line that's somewhere, and you need to just back off just below that. So I always go, so if you can do 300, your element for climbing is probably going to be like 340ish, 350 max. If you know, and then what you can do is then you'll spin the cadence up. You get to the crest of the hill, and then you can lay the power back over the crest. Once you get the speed up, so if you're trying to average 28 miles an hour, uh, you can freewheel at those points, and you hold like that ultra aero position. And your goal is ultimately, when you're going downhill, you freewheel as much as you can. You don't try and bring power into it. Or what I used to do with especially like a lot of athletes, we used to do like a 10 freeze drill, where you pedal for 10 seconds, and then you freewheel for uh, like 3 to 5 seconds, but you've always got to hold your best aero. There's a classic one when Tim O'Donnell finished second in Kona. If anyone goes back and watches it, they come to Harvey, and like Tio, you see him going down, he's like doing like these drills. Because ultimately, what you're trying to do is, when you get to the bottom of the climb, you can lay the power back on. So if like you're hitting a flat, you can then you can hit like that 300 watts again. Or for somewhere like in Kona, your goal is actually, I'm going to hit, you come down Harvey, and then you've got like this massive climb, and your heart rate's going to elevate because you've just got so hot. You're trying to bring like your core temperature down. And that's the same on any course, really. If you think about, like, heat is always going to be a big, especially if you're racing abroad. But if you can bring that core temperature down, then you can hit the climbs more efficiently. And all you're trying to do is, for the duration of that course, is carry the speed. It's not about doing 300 watts. If you can do 290 for the same speed, that's a good day. Does that make sense?
To- Totally, yeah, yeah. No, I'm not sure how many triathletes listening to this have thought about, how to pace it, just like you're describing here. So, do you think? And so you talk about these three positions. So you've got a position that you can be the most aero, so that's the highest speed position, like downhill, tailwind.
Correct.
So that's where you
Yeah.
really want to be, head down. You've got this expression. I don't know, turtling. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, yeah. So everybody, yeah. So that's a good point, really. So what is your most aero position? Like, if you come for a bike fit, I'll work it out for you. So I don't know. If you use somebody like Vince, great example. Went to the wind tunnel with him, and we can already see that he's got great big shoulders, which is a great example of most athletes. So he's, for somebody like him, it's not. He's trying to drop his chin into place, and then his shoulders will rotate, and that happens for a lot of triathletes. It's trying to drop your head. So like if you look at a turtle, it's got this shell on the back. It has to like drive its head forward, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to send the head forward. But it all has to come from your shoulders and your head positioning. What you don't want to do is pull the body forwards. So a lot of triathletes, you go, do the turtle, and then they pull like the body forwards, and actually the shoulders come up and the head comes up. It's all one movement from like your head position. Then you've got it's like rolling your shoulders into place. Uh, that's the scrunch, like you scrunch like your shoulders, and you're trying to bring like your shoulders to your ear. Like you generally find that works if somebody's got great shoulder mobility. Then that's gonna they're probably gonna gain 10 to 15 watts from that. But you would never. No one can hold these two positions for the full duration of like an Ironman, and definitely not even a 70.3. Even a sprint would be quite hard. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring them into the course really, and that's where we're going to see this more and more. Like people will learn, and it's going to evolve. Like it starts with the pros, and the age groupers buy into it, and then all of a sudden everyone's going a lot faster. Uh, and that's but nowadays is we've got so many elements that can help with that. Like the positioning on the bar, and then you've got like all these fancy handlebars. Yes, they look great, but they're all devised to make aero easy, and you can't really just buy a bike off the shelf anymore. Or if you want to go fast, you could spend £20,000 if you want, but if it hasn't got fancy handlebars on, and there's an array of all different ones of these. They're ultimately through the pad and the pole. They're taking all the weight out of the shoulders. So you can imagine the weight goes through it, then it just drops your head and shoulders into place. It's and that stuff is like a game changer. It's not like me 10 years ago. I had to force that position. I had stupid CDA, and my body's still paying the price for it today. Like I've had frozen shoulders. I've had. If you look at my posture, it's not the best. I'm having to rework that, but it comes easy, and that's what all these handlebars and
Mm,
these little bits that they make it do.
mm,
And so for most people, if you're listening to this and you're like, right, I want to optimize and be more efficient, my guess is that you're already probably doing a lot of the right training. Training can always be fine tweak, but you want to try and optimize like your setup really.
mm.
Uh,
I mean, and that's something that you encourage with people that you fit is to go away and do drills to practice these kind of different positions, right? And that I think was the first time I had seen that. I thought it was relatively unique. I hadn't heard that before, and emphasize it as much as you do. But you want people to really, they're not. It's not just one position, but the practicing, as you said, in training these different positions, so that then they can know what it feels like, but also be more efficient come race day in different circumstance.
Totally, like it's like that's good. I did triathlon for a year and a half, and I could swim, but not properly. And I started getting coaching. People were just giving me training programs, and I'm
Mm,
thinking, like, I'm not stupid. Like, I've been a pretty decent athlete. I'm not, I couldn't swim great, but I just knew that there was more to it. And I just thought, well, surely drills is like, and it's not just like a drill that, it needs to be a drill that works for me. Like, I can go on YouTube and I can find sinking legs and then like a load of drills. But it was doing the drills that I was like, man, this is like time trialing. Why isn't anyone thinking about drills in training? Like on the bike, and then you break it down, don't you? It's like, I remember, you can do the 25 a drill, then you go into the main, your main stroke, and if I can, I feel like Michael Phelps, but anyway, that's for 20, another 25, doesn't it?
mm,
But the drills in cycling are so much easier to get. Generally, there's going to be two to four drills that'll work. You've got the turtle drill, the rolling your shoulders into place. A big problem that a lot of triathletes have is pulling forwards like on like the saddle. You can retrain that so it doesn't lift your head. So you learn to push back into the saddle and utilize your glutes a lot better. And then pedal efficiency, where it's not, like a lot of people say the science doesn't prove that doing pedal effectiveness drills doesn't work. I'd argue differently, because if you look at a triathlete, like generally they're just missing out between like that 5 and 8 o'clock phase, because they're almost like trying to run on they're trying to pedal on the toes ultimately. But all you're trying to do is, if you can make yourself more efficient, then you're just not going to utilize the wrong muscles out on like the course. And then you build like the strength over time. Like initially, I always start with doing like a 30-30 drill. So it's like 30 on, 30 off, and you'll do 10-minute blocks. But ideally, you get to the stage that you can do like 4 minutes by 8 of those in a set position. And then if you bring those elements in, and you know what those elements are, what like whether it's shoulder rotation, your head position, whatever it is, then you'll start to, all of a sudden your times will start. We're not talking a few set minutes will be shaved off. So it's definitely worth looking at, and you'll have to work at this for the rest of your life. It doesn't mean that you do 6 weeks and I've got a magic wand and away you go.
Mm.
You have to work at
Maybe
it.
talk about the how the last part about pushing yourself forward on the saddle or pushing back. Like what are your thoughts there, and about that connecting to pedaling efficiency? How are you sort of thinking about that?
Yeah, I think like if you look at you look at a lot of triathletes, especially the good runners, they're all sitting on the nose of the saddle, aren't they? But is that I don't? A lot of it is it's down. Probably they're not even on like the right seat a lot of the time. It's not. It's not an effective way of pedaling. It's how they're trying to generate like power. And I see it more and more. Like you get like these new positions that, say, people go to the wind tunnel and they get like this, they stretch them out because they've not got the rotation in the shoulders, and they get them more over the bottom bracket, because it's generally 2 to 3 centimeters behind like the bottom bracket is where the majority of people are going to generate the power most efficiently. uh, but what can happen is you get in front of the bottom bracket, you take all the, extend like the poles, and then the athlete starts to chase it, and they just sit on the nose. And if you look at them, there's a few great athletes that are out there at the minute, and I can see it from like one year to the next year, and the heads are starting to lift. Do you know what I mean? And they
Mm.
keep chasing like the saddle, but and it's not an effective way of riding. And a lot of the time is, if you are pedaling like that, you just imagine you're utilizing a lot of the muscles that you actually want for like running. But
Right.
and some people, like some coaches, will argue, well, that's great, but actually, if you can spread the load more evenly, then like throughout, the quads and the hamstrings, then you are going to be more efficient, and you're going to run off the bike like more effectively a lot of the time.
Mm.
So it's definitely, it is like that dead spot. I can sometimes hear it and see it like on the turbo trainer, that people, especially if you're new to the sport, you come into it and you can hear it's like douche, like between like 5 and 8. Doosh. They're not pulling through.
Hmm.
But if you can work on that, you will get a more effective pedal stroke. And what generally happens, like you'll always find a way of delivering the power, but when you get into a tailwind section, you'll go, I haven't got a gear big enough, because you're not. And the problem is that you're not pulling through. You can't get on top of the gearing, uh, and and that's when, like somebody that's good and effective, they're going to take so much time out of you into the tailwind section, because they're carrying the speed and they're delivering the power through the pedal stroke.
Mm.
So, and it still amazes me to this day that, the simple, efficient ways of getting even like cleat position on like the shoe, like if you get the right cleat position, then you're gonna get more effective. And Q factor is a big one for a lot of people. Like, so you generally find that, especially if you're running a lot, like you'll roll like your arches in, and you've got a narrow Q factor, and I'll see them on the so you're on the front. You imagine you're on the front of the saddle, you've got a narrow Q factor, and you start whacking the top tube, and it's
Hmm.
just And if your saddle's too wide, which for a lot of people it is, there's so many good saddles on the market. I don't want to drop any brands into it at the minute, but we all know who they are.
Mm,
Uh, but it's kind of like you're just not delivering the power like effectively. Like normally you find for most people that if I get them on the right saddle, I get the cleat position right, and I get the Q factor, and like you can start to see them ride like more efficiently. So nothing, like it's, some people would argue that's not as aero, but it doesn't. That's counterproductive. Like delivering the power like effectively over a big duration. We're not talking of a 4K pursuit now. We're talking of you know anything that's above like 10 minutes realistically. If you
mhm,
can get like this alignment right, then you are going to ride like a lot more efficiently, and you'll
mm,
deliver the power like more effectively. And
mhm,
if you're new to this and you're listening to this, then work on those factors. I think it's the same across, swim, bike, run. Really, work on efficiency, get the drills right, and then the times, and you'll get fitter a lot faster. But it's painstaking to do that, uh, especially in swimming.
it sounds like the I think it's a marketing tagline, but like aero is everything. But for you, there's biomechanics and power delivery factor pretty heavily into this, from what you're saying.
Yeah, like power, efficiency, and control. Power's nothing without control, and that's
Mhm,
always been my, like take on it. Yeah, aero is everything, but yeah, but if you can't run off it, aero is everything for a time trialist, but it's not everything for a triathlete, and that's the pocket of windows that, like you've worked with me. I know that I can get more people at aero, but am I going to get them to run off the bike efficiently? And that's what you're always trying to fill it. It's always like this little window that if you do things the right way, then it'll
mm.
work.
I
Uh,
remember years ago, this is really a long time ago. I think Trek built a very narrow Q factor bike for Armstrong, and he did he didn't like it. It was supposed to be for improved aerodynamics, like you're talking about, but he couldn't produce the power. But yeah, differentiating between time trial and having to run and and the ultra endurance time trials. I mean, full Ironman. There's no typical cycling time trials like that at world tour level that are so long. So we have to balance this, comfort and being able to hold the positions and yeah.
yeah, and it's just training, and then just looking at like these elements. Like and
Mm,
most people, you just need to start with like a proper bike fit.
mm,
Like you see, when you get to the point and you want to bring everything to it, then that's when we bring in the winter and all the track testing and all that type of stuff. But if you've not worked on those factors,
mm,
you're wasting like you're wasting my like for me is like, I'm the most direct person you're ever gonna meet. Like you're wasting my time and I'm wasting yours, and I won't do it. You know what I mean? It's not that I just know that 2 hours in the wind tunnel, if you haven't had a bike fit and like track testing, if you've never been on the track and you're telling me that you can go out and do all these runs and you're finding all these gains, I want to I want to say bullshit. You know what I mean? 'Cause it's not going to happen. Like I've worked with people like Victor Campanets and I've worked with Lotto Sadal for 4 years, and I could get 8 runs out of those guys, and they're world tour. The world tour athletes. Somebody like Victor, when we got to the hour record, we could get 10 to 12, but it's you, there's too many elements that you're trying to look at. Uh, and you can get wrong a lot of the time. Like this, it's like aero testing. There's good aero testing, bad aero testing. Like if you're just chasing aero and you're not looking at windows, and what windows mean is your angles and speeds, and
mhm,
then positions. So how complicated is that? You know,
mm.
so you've got no. So I've got to switch out your bike. I've got to put all the fancy poles on and do all this stuff. I've then got to work out like, well, what speed do you want to travel at? Okay, well, I just want to go 50 kilometers. That's too fast. You know what I mean? I've seen it so many times. Like people bringing me these reports, and I'm like, oh, this is a waste of time. I need to go back to basics because you, like you're looking at such small windows, and that's when like doing your sweeps but it all costs a lot of money. Like we went to the wind tunnel. We're doing yaw sweep, a big yaw sweep. If you want to look at some, it's going to take 10 to 15 minutes.
Mhm.
It's £500 an hour to go to the wind tunnel. It's kind of, well, you're just burning cash, but if you've got everything right going into it, then you can do all of that stuff, and then you evolve it. You're not going to do everything all in one hit, really.
Mm.
So start with the basics. So even a normal bike fit to make sure you don't get injured. Then you can get like your aero fit. Then you can look at all of like these elements, but never ever walk into a bike shop and think that that's it. And anyone that tries to sell you that, I know I build loads of bikes. I fit loads of bikes. It's not true, like no bike manufacturers, they're not manufacture the ultimate cockpit, and they're not manufacturing it for your individual needs really. So don't be like, born into like the hype.
Mm. So we could talk about the process with Vince. So we went we went to Silverstone together, but before that though he's had a couple of fits with you in your
Yeah,
studio. So maybe
yeah.
if somebody like anybody comes in, but what's your process? Because I like they focus on the basics, focus on because the end result is we didn't actually change that much as a result of it was tweaking, but it was because you had we had dialed in the primary fit pretty well from what you could see, but also the feedback from Vince.
Yeah. I remember Vince coming to me. It was weird. Yeah. It always happens. I normally get a follow on like Instagram or something. I thought, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool. Vincent Luis following me, and then it was about, I think it's about 3 years ago actually. I can't remember him doing. He did Daytona, didn't he? And he didn't go brilliantly. Then uh, he reached out to me. I don't know if it wasn't long after that or a year after that. And I think he was just coming in to test me out, realistically. I think we'd done somewhere. Had Alan Royal been in by that point? I think.
I think there was a connection there. Yeah,
Yeah, I
with
think
Aaron.
he'd been in, and then Vince, he just came along like one day. He was just somebody that I hit it off with. He was telling me all the problems that he had. Uh, like you always find that someone's come, like, Vince is a great swimmer, come from ITU, they really struggle to rotate the pelvis into place. And that's what we kind of went through really. It was just like, okay, well, what are your goals? And he was on about, well, this is going to be, 2 to 3 years down the line. He wanted to go to long course. So I was like, okay, well, if you start working on like these elements, let's get you into a proper fit. We get planted on like a saddle, because at the time he had quite a white saddle. We put like some bars on and stretched out his reach ultimately, because and what that allowed him to do was rotate, and he could drop his head into place, because that's one of the things that he struggled with. And then from there, and he just gets obsessed with some stuff, and then we just fine tweak it. I've never met anyone like, I've worked with a lot of detail, a lot of people, but his attention to detail is like a next level. We've just evolved it from like then, really. And then obviously now he made the decision like last year. He just sent me a It was just after the Olympic. He goes, "It's time," and I was like, "Right." And then that's how obviously we touched base, and then I was like, "Right, okay, let's see. Well, what are the elements? What sponsorship restrictions have you got? Who are the people that are going to support you?" And then we fine tuned it all. And because that's what's great about him, he can build his bikes. He's like unbelievable. So I was able to communicate like doing Zoom and stuff. And then we obviously met up and we went to the wind tunnel. And then that's when we went through a process of like fine tuning everything. Initially looking at the positions that we kind of knew that would work. Was it stretching out more, going narrower, longer? And then we what I always do is, you want to go to two extremes really with the position. You go higher and lower, and then there'll be a window, because sometimes you might find that if someone can rotate the head and they can drop the shoulders at the lower one, you think, yeah, that's giving me 4 watts more than the medium one. But it's that medium position that you always find is the most successful, because you can you'll be able to run off the, especially for triathlete, they're going to be able to run off that, and then they can train it more effectively. And that's what you can see with Vincent, like, because he's worked on the position he can rotate his pelvis into place, and that's why he can be quite aggressive with. But he could be even more aggressive than where we are today, really. Uh, and then that's once you've got those elements in, and that's when you can look at like all the bottle placements and then that's always it's like individual base really. And what we were able to do with all of those elements was we yaw swept them as well. We looked at different speeds, and we did like a yaw sweep because I see some of the, like some of these people. Yeah, man, I made 30 watts. Did you really? Like it doesn't happen, and
Mm.
we come out of that test, and you find in between 10 and 15 watts, which is, I do believe, if I bike fitted you, that's the window, and it's if you've had a successful bike fit and you've worked with somebody that knows what they're doing, it's like 10 to 15 watts over an Ironman, and that's a lot of time. Like 10 watts is going to be 4 to 5 minutes. It's you know, it, so they're good windows. It's a good
Mm.
time to have really. So and that's what I've loved, and then from that element we've been able to go, okay, well, these are the drills that you need to work on, and you've been able to implement them into the training. And then it's having that engagement. That's the part that I love the most, is with somebody like Vint. He's very engaged with like what we're doing, and obviously I can communicate with you, and it work. That's the most successful way of doing it.
Mm. No, it is really an integrated process, isn't it? Connecting the what you can see with data that we can collect, but then the day to day of implementing both drills, but also, some of the principles of your training that we've also connected. I think that have really helped because you can't drills are connected also to the training in that sense.
Yeah, and then there's the physiological, and you like the physiological adaptation starts to kick in. Like you don't go in and start doing, because you can bring in threshold work, VO2 max work in the position, but you can't do that. It's pointless chasing those parts until like you've got efficient, then you get fit. Uh, and that's the way to work it really. But it takes a like it does take a brave coach or a brave person to go, do you know what? Like I could do with a little bit of a help with this. But most people don't. I work with, I don't know, I've done some amazing stuff. Some people just think they know it all. That's
Mm.
great. Okay, carry on. Like I'm not going to stop you. It's not my job. But uh,
Well, I
that,
mean, the field of bike fitting and into aerodynamics and that connection has evolved so much. I mean, you talk about it. I mean, I reflected the first time I went to a wind tunnel. Know what year it was. It was the San Diego low speed wind tunnel. It would be 2005, six, something there. And we didn't nearly have, to be honest, I don't really know what we were doing then. We had people that run the tunnel that were supporting it, but it wasn't, and then I compare the second one was, I think it was in the UK. It was with Chris Boardman, and he facilitated, I think, the Southampton tunnel. I
yeah,
think there's one at the university there, and there was a different level of understanding there. It was about road positions and like having
yeah,
made you drop the elbows, whether being in the drops was worse than being on the hoods with the elbows down, head position, and that was like information. Whether the little aero bars worked or not, because back
yeah,
in the
yeah,
day,
yeah,
because some of them they were they were worse with the mini aero bars than they were just on the
yeah,
dropped elbows. And then now to this tunnel in Silverstone that is a much more sophisticated facility. They've got experienced people running it, but even then, there's a difference between, I think, you coming in and facilitating that process, connecting to the bike fit. I mean, sometimes you have to do that remotely because you can't always come in, but they also have good people that run the tunnel.
yeah. No, totally, and that's the art of it. Like you, because I'll see a lot of stuff that most people can't see. But I just think how many people I've looked at, and then I'm trying to that's the art for me, is like it's very easy to go to these facilities and chase like, oh, stick your head down. But then I remember going to Vince like, mate, look down the road, like think
Mm,
about, you've got whoever you're chasing, like you need to have them in front of you, and that's the art of it, and then you can tweak it. And
mm,
if something is like sometimes if something looks too stupid, like if he's chucking out a random. then the chances are it's not working. You know what I mean? It might look great, and I've seen a lot of people and athletes bring this into the race, and it's just not realistic. And you're not thinking about the demands of what that athlete's trying to achieve. Like it's ridiculous. Like we've had Sean Cohen and all these things, and that blows my mind that people are making like those mistakes. And like you've got, it's so much more to think about than aero. So, but yeah, the facilities are great now, but it's a tool at the end of the day. It's only as good as like you use that tool, and that's why when people tell me that they go in there, you know, you could go and book the wind tunnel tomorrow, Joel, and run it. Do you know what I mean? Like you do a bit of training, you have to train that, but you can't. Yeah, I like to bring in teams. Always played in teams. 3 people to the wind tunnel. You know, yeah. Does that cost more money? Yes. Does it? Will it bring better success? Yes, it will. And if you're going to do it once, do it properly. You know, like don't mess around. Same with bike fit, really. Yes. Is it going to take you 3 months to see me? Yeah, it is. But there's a reason for that, and I have to do it. Like when I'm, I can. I've had to do it at such a level that I can't mess that up. Do you know what I mean? It's like I can't go and injure this athlete. I can't. They've got to go away with all like these tools to like utilize, and then I've got. And the fortunate thing for me is it's not really the bike fit. I can get somebody's saddle height with my eyes. I've got like pressure mapping that I use, and I've got like retool and motion capture. I don't necessarily use that a lot. If I want to prove to somebody, do you need to get new cranks? I'll stick it on and I can explain it to them. But I
Mhm.
can see it, like, and I'm looking at, how the body is working,
Mhm.
uh, and that's the art.
So it's interesting, there are the bike fitting space has exploded in partly in part, I assume, but I'm interested in what you think in the commercialization of the tool, retool, the bike fitting tool, which gives you ranges, right? I mean, it's based on averages. The light turns green, all good. Light red is bad.
Yeah,
But it sounds like that's an entry point for somebody. But what you're doing, you're
yeah.
you're not relying on these kind of, it's
Ah,
just potentially a piece
it's
of
just an
information.
algorithm.
Yeah.
And the problem is the algorithm's like 15 years old now.
Mm.
Oh, it's probably 20 years old. It's
Mhm.
just it's a way of starting. It's not a way to finish. Like I don't believe, and I'm this. Some of the most successful bike fitters in the world would argue with me now. If you think that you're delivering like these amazing bike fits through your motion capture,
Mhm.
bullshit. Like, anyone that's really good, like they can see and they'll tell you what to do, and then you'll correct it and you'll feel it. And that's what I always do with people. Don't follow the numbers. If someone's looking at the screen and not looking at you, not prodding into you, not doing all this stuff, then they're not analysing you. The computer is telling them, but it like don't that that's it's just a starting point. And there's some crazy systems out there now. Like there's one that's like 30 odd thousand pounds. It's like it's incredible, but it's still not going to correct all these. Like if you've got someone that's good, then they're going to be able to do it with their eyes.
Mhm.
Yeah. So but yeah, it's evolving, but I still think there's a lot of like I don't think like bike fitting is still it, people need to do more of an apprenticeship. I think a lot of people see that, and like triathlon coaches, if you listen to this and you're bike fitting, I keep seeing your fits, carry on doing it because you're not you obviously they start thinking of money. You know what I
Mm.
mean? I'm not obsessed with money at all. It's kind of success. Success means everything to me, and that's the art of it. That they just think that they can do these bike fits, charge a few £100, and away you go. But it's not like that.
Mm.
It's much more in depth.
Well, you said that the number of reps that you have, the different people you see, the solutions you come up with. I mean, the more practice you get at that over time, the better. But it's hard to do that if that's not your focus. I think you can't catch up to you. You must have done thousands and thousands at this
Yeah,
point.
I reckon it's like for me is I've worked with like well over 4,000 people now, like, and the great thing for me is I work with all like the brands, do you know what I mean? Like whether like Drag 2 Zero is obviously the one that we're involved with. It's like Vince is like with Watch Shop. But I can, I know these people, I can go, like Vince, like he needed a few bits. I tell him what he needs. they manufacture it for him, and that's what is quite unbelievable in like the UK and all these brands. Like, you know, we're working with them, and I understand what the product does. Like, it's like if I need a shim to convert somebody's bike, I can get that shim made. You know, like we're in a position now that it doesn't matter what bike you've got, we'll be able to do. We'll be able to make it work, and that's. And then I've got this, and I've got an engineering brain that I can make it happen. Do you know what I mean? I can. Yeah, I've got the mechanical skills to be able to rebuild and put it back together.
It seems like that's a big part of what you need these days is a good toolbox with all different length screws and different shims and
I
different parts to.
Yeah, it's a bit. Yeah, it's overwhelming at points. Like I've probably got everybody's poles and like so it's just like bolts. Yeah, you got M5s, M6s. That's what majority of the bikes. But there's like so many different ones. And where I pride myself on is I've never ever sent anybody home. Number one, with not a complete bike, you know, like rebuilt. No one's ever left me with no gears working, no nothing. And I've always had the stuff in stock to be able to alter that. And then if somebody needs like extra length, or you haven't got, you know, sometimes people haven't got the budget to be able to do it, then I'll come, right, this is what I can get it to a certain point, but over time, this is what we need to get for you. And then you can evolve it really, because it is a bit overwhelming. You've just brought a new bike, and then you're like, oh, it doesn't fit me quite right.
Mm-hmm.
Because the hardest ones are people that are really small and people that are really tall. Because
Right.
it's like there's not really a way of not being able to convert it really. So
Hmm. Now, you made a good point before as well about the expertise in the UK scene in particular. There's a lot of aerodynamics expertise, and I suppose, but I'm interested in your opinion. Is that because the time trial scene has been so strong over the years? Like it's just
yeah,
driven towards this in terms of
absolutely.
innovation. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone that's come through into the sport and a lot of the products that you're seeing, if it's UK based, have come from time trialing and they're just obsessed with it.
Mm,
It's like yeah, it's fascinating really because they understand like how important it is, you know, like like this speed because like in the UK, like 10 mile time trial is the goal. Do you know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
It used to be 25, but now the goal is, and you want to go. The goal is to break 30 miles an hour.
Right.
So then you get all these people. Oh well, I want to do 34, 35 miles. How can I do that? And then they're pushing like the boundaries. It's like if the biggest one is like the bottle down the chest. Oh yeah, that we created that 12 years ago. Do you know what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, we never told anybody because we knew that it would come into the sport and people would then trying to push the boundaries of it, not knowing what
Right.
it did. It was
Mm,
created for Tony Martin in the World Time Trial Championship. It was actually bubble wrap it started off with,
right.
but it's kind of like that is the problem sometimes. Like the UK are always going to push the boundaries because they're obsessed with speed.
Mm.
then then it starts to come into you start to sit in triathlon and
Mm.
uh,
Well, people may not realize. I mean, probably the time trial scene. I don't know if there's another place in the world that takes time trialing so seriously. And as you say, a lot of them very high speed. But if you look at the results, it's incredible the speeds. I mean, some of them are along. Dual carriageways and very fast roads,
yeah,
but
yeah,
but
yeah,
still,
yeah.
it's pushed the innovation, as you said. Unlike I don't know anywhere else that's so serious.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's mad. Like you can get you can get any skin suit made here, any handlebar, any pad, anything. You know what I mean? It's like there's so many people manufacturing stuff. It's like
Mm,
incredible, really. But it
mm,
is. It's this. It's very much like an obsession with speed.
mm,
Because ultimately, like all aerodynamic, it's not complicated. Like yes, you like the CDA is just all you're trying to do is attach the air to yourself, like so your head position, if you start with that, you're trying to interact the head to the shoulders. So having a helmet that you get the attachment from the tail onto your shoulders and it leaves like your back in like a nice line. So you just imagine if you look into the mirror, like and start moving your shoulders, you'll start to see like how you can manipulate your body into like that position. It's the first rule of thumb for everybody.
Hmm.
Best thing you can do is get a mirror, have a look at yourself in the mirror, and start moving your hands into different positions and reach.
Hmm.
And that'll get you into it. It's a good starting point.
Hmm. Well, that's I mean, maybe it's a good segue. In that you talked initially about your experience. I feel like it wrecked your body, your upper body. But in the old days, the early days, it seemed like real like slam down front ends, really low, really narrow was the thing. um, but that's
Totally.
not the case anymore. I mean,
No.
everything. No, I don't know if anyone's riding like that. It's very stacked up, very long extensions. What do you think is the origin of that change? I mean, it must be faster,
Well,
but yeah.
yeah, well, the origin of change is that that's what was most aerodynamic way. Like it kind of still works for me, but I think I'm manipulating my body into that. But it's kind of it was trying to close the gap between like you were trying to be as low. You just imagine your profile as low as possible. We're trying to get your head as low as you could, and then we all had there was probably like two angles of pole. Like you had one that had a bit of a kick up, then Cancellara, he brought like the S bend up that we all thought was the most efficient way,
Hmm.
but she's quite aggressive on the wrist, but it used to leave you like quite exposed. But the idea was that if you get a good position, and it still would be the fastest, but it's kind of like the chances of producing the power more efficiently
Right.
uh, they're just not there. And now we're very limited on like helmets and all of that kind of stuff. Where like now, it's like you can have like a flat back is always probably going to be the fastest position, but you can have like a rounded back, and then we've got so many different array of angles and poles now. You can go in like like 5 degree increments that. And then you can open up your hips, which generates more power, but all these new, like the new angles, they just allow you to take the weight out of the shoulders and you just drop into it. We'll,
Mm,
we'll never ever go back to, like the super slam positions.
mm,
Uh, but that's ultimately it's the same process. You're trying to close this gap between your shoulders and your head. So if you imagine you stick your hands out in front of you, there'll be like a gap that you're always trying to close like that gap. And what that does is it'll drop your chin into place, and then you'll cut through the air. So try the mirror.
and it's much more comfortable, I think, as you say, than they used to be. I mean, this is more accessible to more people, more body shapes. Maybe some people with less flexibility, but able to get in the better position now.
Yeah, but you can still, even if you've got bad flexibility with like all these arm, like the poles are just like magic, like, and we can start at like you've probably got to spend a few £100 on poles,
Mhm.
like, and then and you've got to get a pad. It's actually the pad a lot of the time that gives the biggest gain because it's like you drive into it and then it'll rotate your shoulder into place. So like high-sided pads, that's probably the first thing I buy. Like go and buy some high-sided pads because then you can push into the side of it and it'll rotate your shoulder into place. And then all the pole does is it takes the weight and then it drops you into it. But you've probably got to spend, like if you're thinking you've got £500 to £600, and then you'll have like an amazing front end. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? And that's much better than going spending £10,000 or £5,000 on a new bike. So if you've got this bike and you're like, oh, I'm on the fence, don't go and buy the latest thing. No, spend it on your front end because you can always transfer that over. Like once you've brought a decent front end, then you're good to go, really.
Mm,
But it does make it so easy. And all you're trying to do is the bigger the forearm support, once you make the first move, providing you probably gain 10 watts, 10 to 12 watts in a nice front end that touches touches the arm. Obviously, if you get the wider ones, like the wider forearm support, all that you might gain a couple of watts, but you don't get that. It's not like you gain another 10.
right.
It's marginal. It'll make it easier to hold though. So
Right.
and that's all it's trying to do.
I mean, that's a big change over the early aero bars that really just had an elbow pad. There was nothing in between, but now it's supporting your whole forearm is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, and then
Mm,
that and in fairness, like different angles, then a lot of the time will push you back into the saddle.
Hmm.
So, like those two, it's like the first thing for the majority of the people that come into me. Then I generally start with the if they've got specific saddle problems, I always start on the rear of the saddle, and then unless it looks ridiculous, then I'll fix it. But then I'll start on the front end, then I'll fine tune the back end really, because
Hmm.
that's the part that's going wrong in bike fit all the time. Like you go in, the bike fitter just fiddles around with the seat a little bit. Being understanding that if you move the poles just like 5 mil, 10 mil, it changes it straight away. But
Right.
it took me years to understand that part.
So you start in the front, try to optimize arms, shoulders, how the head sits, and then go back. What's the step two?
Step two, then then obviously well, if with feet and alignment, then that kicks in, because once you push back into like the bike, then it's the alignment of the body. Do you know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
if you imagine if I you walk in and you just want me to, I can set the seat, but if what it'll do is, soon as I vault with the front, you'll push into the saddle, then I can start to get you symmetrical. But if you've not altering the front end a lot of the time, you're already on the tip of the saddle. You won't do it in the fit, but as soon as you go outdoors, you'll do it because you generate more power.
Mm.
I would test that if I wanted to prove it to you,
Mm.
and then that's when you bring like the alignment into it. But if you talk about bike fit, like everyone goes, it starts with the foot, and it does. Do you know? But it starts with the foot once you get into place.
Mm. Yeah.
So.
You talked before about cleat position. What do you think about I don't think there's too many people that do this, but these cleats that are really far back on like midfoot. Is that, I mean,
Yeah, like I have done that with a couple, like two athletes who I work with. Well, two. We did it with like Lucy Charles. I used to work with her a long time ago when she was with Specialized, and we put her into mid cleat. And what you can do with that is it'll drop the pro. So that was like an aero profile that you're trying to drop the body, because you can drop the saddle probably like 30 mil,
mm,
and then and in turn you can drop like the front end, so aerodynamically it'll make you like more efficient.
mm,
If somebody's got repetitive calf strain, so we had this with like Ruth Astle, that I had to take a calf out of the equation to kind of ride like more effectively,
mm,
then it's a good way of being able to do that. So if somebody comes into me, I've done it with probably like 10 athletes that they're getting a lot of calf pain, then mid cleat will take the calf out of the equation. So where it's not very good is that you'll lose acceleration,
mhm,
because like that you right in the center of the foot, you get overlap of like the front wheel. So if like if you're riding anything technical, then it's
mm,
not so good. But it does work for some people. But generally, the rule of thumb is for most athletes is that taking the cleat back, especially for triathlon, it's gonna help.
mm,
Like, because if you just think that, like you've got your toes, you don't really want to be utilising them. It's that, that centre point of the foot that it's a great way of delivering power. And then for a lot of people, if we insert like an insole into that, then that foot position is pretty planted really.
mm,
And then over time is that they're going to get less back pain, less hip pain, because a lot of it, less knee pain, because it's not, like when you get knee pain, a lot of it is probably coming from like your foot. It's
mhm,
not necessarily like from like the
mm.
knee. Uh,
So it's a kind of an exception or a certain circumstance where you'd be this midfoot thing, but in general, cleats farther back for triathlon,
Yeah,
and
it's kind of like the rule of thumb, like
yeah.
unless you're very explosive,
Mm,
like most triathletes are. So it'd be more important, like if you were looking at somebody that's doing ITU, then it's probably going to be a little bit different. Like
mhm,
yeah, you probably have the cleat just a little bit more forward.
mm,
The problem we've got now is that a lot of the shoes, the cleat, the drillings of the shoes, and a lot of the new ones, they're quite far forwards anyway. So we can't we want to try and get that back, and that's what I struggle with. Like cities and Mavics, they're terrible. Like I think City have just realised that actually they've started to make new shoes now because they realise that like the cleat's just too far
The
forwards.
default drilling is really forward in the
Yeah,
shoe. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Sometimes you think that all these shoes are like they're drilled to perfection, but sometimes I think sometimes it comes to a Friday and somebody might they might be a little bit off. So
Funny,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. And you mentioned insoles. Is that something that you put a lot of people
yeah.
into? Mhm.
Yeah, well, the majority of people, unless they're very flat-footed, then yeah, the insole will help them quite a bit. It helps, like if you looked at like pure power, but it needs to be like above like 1,000 watts. Like for track sprinters, there's a lot in like having like like supporting like the arch.
Mhm.
Generally, for a lot of people, as especially if you're doing long distance, like the arch, you start to fatigue, the arch starts to collapse, and then it will pull on your hip
Mhm.
or your knee. And then like you see obviously get a lot of lower back pain, and then
Mhm.
like they're like doing the shuffle when they come out of transition. A lot of that can just be like from like the foot. I
Mm.
think if like the most people that have come to me and they've had insoles,
Mm.
it, it's
So you
it's
mean like
great.
the default insoles that come with your average shoe maybe doesn't have very much support, so you're getting an insole that's got a bit more structure to it, not necessarily custom, but like is that what you're talking about? Sort of the
Yeah, well,
off the
we make
shelf structure?
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
For us is we do like a SIDAS custom one, so
Hmm.
because you'll always find that that each arch is generally never the same. So,
Hmm.
but there's loads on the market now that like you could go and buy the different ranges
Hmm.
that you can like. Some people have got a flat foot, some people have got medium arch, high arch. So but
Mm.
the majority of people like their arch support generally helps, and like some people say that they're flat-footed a lot of the time, but they like rotate inwards. But a lot of it, they've got like a really long arch, and just adding that bit of support can help them quite a lot.
Mm.
So
Mm.
it's definitely like yeah. And then I always find as well is if you pressure map somebody, you support like the arch, that it kind of it gets them more aligned like on like the seat. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? And then
So
it's
that's what you
pretty
mean by
impressive.
pressure mapping. You're talking about saddle pressure mapping, like
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
What?
because that's what you want. You want to try and get an even spread of like your sit bones on like the saddle. Because
Hmm.
what you'll find is once athletes start getting, especially into the 40s, they become very dominant on like one side.
Hmm.
A lot of it is just like rotation of the pelvis. Like
Hmm.
the obviously you can get that corrected. But well, with constant physio, but he's trying to get them more symmetrical on like the saddle.
Hmm.
That's what we're trying to achieve.
Mm. I don't know if it's as common now, but what do you think about like cleat wedges as a way to manage kind of how the foot is sitting on the pedal?
Yeah, well, I use Cleat wedges, not with everybody, but some
Hmm.
people.
Hmm.
You can try and trick like uh, you can trick people into utilizing like that, that leg more efficiently.
Hmm.
Just falling it like physios don't like it.
Hmm.
I've used it quite a lot, and I get good results out of it.
Hmm.
Because what you find is that most people sitting at a desk and they really like twist to like one side,
Hmm.
and I'm just trying to get them. It's like you can almost like manipulate the pelvis back into place, but
Hmm.
obviously, like long term, they need to get physio. But
Hmm.
if you can get this, you almost like trick the mind a little bit. Then it
Hmm.
starts to utilize like that muscle, and
Hmm.
you'll see it sometimes that like you've got one quad bigger than the other that they need like that wedge in like the shoe. Then
Hmm.
and it might be that you can take that out.
Hmm.
It just depends like on like the individual and
Hmm.
like virus wedges they can work as well. Like people that they keep hitting like the top tube, but over time your body will. It's very smart. It kind of it'll default again. But
Right.
I do think for some people, it definitely can help. It's
Hmm.
all based on like the individual, really.
Hmm. You must see some athletes that come in with sort of leg length discrepancies, whether either structural or functional.
Yeah.
What's your approach there? Is it
But
because you.
most of it is functional, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And then I would a lot of the time I end up wedging the shoe. To be honest,
Mm.
it's just trying to, and you can see it on like the pressure map. Like it's so lopsided
Mhm.
that it's the unless they're going to do like, you know, like we've got people that we work with, like with strength and conditioning, we've got physios, osteopaths. The chance of them, it's like probably 9 out of 10 aren't going to do anything. So it's kind of, we can help them on their way a lot of the time.
Mm, mm-hmm,
It's like what I've got one of my athletes that I'm out in Boulder with. He's like in his 60s. He's got 60 mil of shim in his shoe, and he limps like he limps like he broke his ankle when he was a kid. Never got it fixed, but he limps. But you see him on the bike, he looks like it was a game changer for him. So
mm,
like, you know, he's getting so many saddle sores. He's all lopsided,
mm,
and he's not delivering power. But like now, he can ride his
mm,
bike. He's happy as
mm,
Larry.
mm. You must see people with every pedal system, but do you have a preferred pedal system if somebody was to choose from scratch?
I think like I just think like I love the like Shimano and Look. I do like because of the uh you know, like you've got like that platform. I think for a lot of people, you know, when you're first starting out, those shoes like those are the best systems to go to because you can learn to, you've got this big surface area that you can push through. But speed play, I've been on speed plays for like 16 years now, and they're really good. How we can alter like the, you know, you can alter the Q factor. How they move is they roll like the feet, which is really good. It's less aggressive on like the knees, uh, and yeah. So there's a lot more. I can maneuver a speed play cleat quite a lot more.
Hmm.
Uh, but I think they're all really like all those systems. They've all got for and againsts for them. Uh, yeah, it's individual preference a lot of the time. But I think I do like the speed play in terms of like what we can do with it.
Mm-hmm. One trend I've seen more recently is the shoe designs being more wide in the toe box. Like
Yeah.
there's some that have been like that a long time, but like mainstream brands catching up as opposed to the kind of narrow ones. But that's got to be a good thing over the long term, you would think.
Yeah, like those two metatarsal joints. Yeah, it's like back in the day, I always wanted Karnak shoes because of like Chris Boardman and Graham Obi rode them, but they were too narrow for me. I've got a bunion on my foot now from you know, like squeezing into them. But yeah, shoe design is yeah, it's evolving. Like Lake, Bont, and Shimano, they do a really good job with like wide fitting shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Most people will go for the narrow one, but a lot of the time they do need like the wider foot. It's the same with pedal axles. Everyone goes for the narrow one, but most people need the wider shoe axle. I mean
Right.
the wider pedal axle.
So you would change that out if you could, if somebody came in and their
Yeah,
Q
obviously
factor was too narrow for their hips or for how
yeah,
they're
we can use washers, or if it's really bad, then we
right.
don't like the Q
Good.
factor.
Just use
Yeah.
washers to shim it out. That's an easier way to do it. Yeah, yeah. What about obviously more recently there's been the shorter crank sort of trend. I mean, I when I've heard that, I thought actually in triathlon that's been kind of a bit longer, but it's certainly in cycling time trial awareness, at least on the world tour, there's been some news stories about, I can't remember what they're called,
Uh, it,
Visma changing Lisa
It's
bike
been
change.
awesome, mate. I've
Yeah.
loved it. I've sold more 165 cranks in this last year than yeah.
Yeah.
Not this isn't even me. I'm not through Bike Fit. This is we've got a website. Our biggest selling item by a long way is 165 cranks.
Funny, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind. I do think that yeah. Obviously, like look, I wouldn't like. I'm on 165s on my time trial bike now, and I
Mm,
always rode 170s. I wouldn't have wanted 170s back in the day because you do, for me, you lose a little bit of torque. You know,
mhm,
you'll feel it on like the climbs.
mhm,
Uh, but it is for, all it's going to do is, for a lot of people, it's going to open up your hips more.
mm,
So, does it work for everybody? No. And it's kind of, it's just, it's assessing like the individual just because, like Tadej Pogacar is a freak of nature. He's like one in a million. We're not like how he accelerates. Like not many people can accelerate how he does. You know, like he's traveling along at 450 watts or whatever, and then he's accelerating at 1,000. There's not much how he delivers that power. This like Van der Poel wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? It's like it's incredible. So just because he does it doesn't mean that you need to know like why you want like the one, you
mm,
know, those short cranks and
mm,
but yeah, again, but what it will do is for a lot of people, when we talk about delivering the power, if
Mm,
you imagine it'll drop like your ankle into place like a lot more.
mm,
So for a lot of triathletes that have, they've got like this ankle, and where they lift their ankle, it will help with that because
mhm,
it can take like the calf out of the equation with the right saddle height.
mm.
So, but it's knowing how short is short.
Right.
Uh, for a lot of people, if you've got like longer limbs, the change is probably not going to be as dramatic, to be honest.
Mm,
Are those gains massive? For some people, yes, they are. Like the majority of people, it's going to be marginal gains. It ain't going to give you.
mm.
Uh, I'm sure people will argue with me, but I think it might give you 1 to 2 watts. Maybe you might be lucky, you might get 5, but
Mm.
all of a sudden, you're not. Uh, it, yeah, you're probably not going to give you minutes, but
No, no. I mean, I
it
think this has been, I mean, studied, and reasonably well. I think there's not, yeah, huge power difference, but maybe the fit difference potentially, as you say, we have a bit
but
more room at the top of the pedal stroke, maybe at the bottom
yeah,
as
so
well. There's
you're
some.
just going to open up the hip like a
Mm,
lot more. But if
mm,
somebody, like they've got no, like if you look at them and say, like we look at your, like your hip rotation, your hip mobility, 'cause that's what I found. I've got so tight in like my left hand side. So when I'm on the time trial bike, the 165s have helped me quite a lot. Could always kick this left leg out, so it just means that I can open that up. So if you've got, like if you look at somebody's hip mobility, if they can't move, then that 165s or shorter cranks will help them.
mm,
So it'll stop like the knees flaring out ultimately.
mm.
So
Yeah. The last tech thing, I suppose you talked about saddles before, and you see you didn't want to name any brands, but what do you think about there's triathlon specific ones that are, really quite wide. There, where's the, I mean, there's the short nose sort of trend. I mean, what
I,
do you sort of see now as the
well,
options
yeah.
that you go to?
I feel we don't need that. Like those saddles now is there's so many good ones. Like our biggest the saddle I find, he buys my stride,
Hmm.
is like it's an amazing seat. It for I say probably like 8 or 10 people, it's going to solve like a lot of their problems because it's narrower and it's female and male specific. Doesn't work for everybody. Majority of people it will, and it just gets you a lot more symmetrical and it's not that wide like on like the front, but it's also not too narrow. And it just stabilizes like the pelvis like a lot of the time. What we find with the wide saddles, that physic one that we're talking about, I hate that. That's my word. Some people love it. Generally works better if you've got wider sit bones.
Hmm.
But most people, you'll find that these wider saddles, that it flares like the knees out. And over time, especially if you're an older athlete, once you get into your foot, you start to dominate on one leg. I don't know, like your pelvis just twists into place somehow. It almost like gets locked. And then if it's not got the support on the front, you'll generally find that it'll drop to like one side. And then that's when you start getting, like, oh, I've got a bit of back pain. Or if you look at your saddle and it's shaved on like one side,
Hmm.
like I see that quite a lot. It's not having that nose support at the front
Hmm.
that's not great.
So when we're talking about width, it's like all the front end width, or do you mean also the
Yeah,
back?
it's
Like,
kind of a combination of the two. Like a lot of
mm,
them, as you go back, they start to get wider. For
mm,
female athletes, generally the wider saddles can work quite well. A lot of
mm,
males, they struggle to get, and then they end up they'll sit on the nose of the saddle. And I
hmm,
think if you start to look at athletes, like this new generation that we've got coming through, they're not nose heavy as,
mm,
like you roll back like 10 years and everyone was
mm.
on the nose.
Well, as you
So
say, if you start with the front end, and the front ends are different, they're higher up, they're more comfortable. You can push into them more. Maybe that's also changed a bit what the best saddles may be for those
yeah,
positions.
correct, yeah, and
Mm,
that's when you start looking at like the saddles, and then you can pressure map the two. Like you can start with your baseline, then you can go back into like that point. And
mm,
I think that's where like I think with handlebars and stuff, we're at the pinnacle of it. Saddles will start to improve.
mm-hmm,
I think shoes will start to improve as well.
hmm.
So I think that's exciting.
Mm.
Like. like it's going to bring more comfort. That's the element that we want in it. Those two things. If you get
Mm.
more comfort, you will go faster.
Mm. I mean, it sounds like what you said on the saddles, you use a pressure mapping system to sort of see how people are sitting and whether on the front, back, and whether they're asymmetrical. So is that been relatively recent implementing that, or has that been out
I
for a
think it's
long
been
time?
around for probably the last 5 years, really.
Mm.
The problem with it is it's just a very expensive system to invest in. Like
Mm.
it's £5,000, and then you have a license, but it's kind of and then things go wrong. So
Like all
I
tech.
think, yeah, I must have spent £10,000 on pressure map,
Right,
but
right.
it's kind of like it's a win-win formula, you know. Like I think that if you bike fitting, you ain't got pressure mapping, then
Mm. Mm.
you need it, you know, like, and that's when, yeah, it's golden, really.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm. This has been a very wide-ranging discussion so far. It feels like you could speak for hours and hours on this as from your experiences. But I wonder, as summarizing maybe some of the myths that you see in bike fitting and aerodynamics. You've touched on them all along, but like in terms of takeaways for people to think about, what is the common mistakes or the myths that you would want to set people straight on in terms of
well,
how they're
yeah,
fitting on
well, I
their
feel,
bikes?
yeah, I think I was sitting on the front of the nose of the saddle. It shouldn't feel like that. Should the
Mm.
saddle feel uncomfortable? No. Uh, is the yeah? I think the art of it is it's just knowing that there's not one size fits all. You know, like you've got to work out what works for you really, and don't chase what never chase what the pros are doing. That's the worst. You can look at them, but don't chase what they're doing because the chances are like they've got some have got better mobility, better range. You've got to work out what's right for you, really.
Mhm.
But and it's all these little fits that looking at yourself as an individual that will give you like the biggest rewards a lot of the time. But if you do just break it down in terms of start with your position, then look at helmets and skin suits or tri suits, then you can start then we can start looking at like rolling resistance and friction, and that's how you always look at it. And then you start to align like those all those elements, and you'll get like faster and more efficient. And if you do make mistakes, learn from them. You know, like if something's not working or you're not comfortable, then like yeah, evolve it.
Mm. And then connecting that to the last piece that we talked about before is out in the field practicing these positions and dialing in your pacing strategy to deliver your aerodynamics and performance in the competitions.
Totally. And learn from your mistakes. Like if you ride like an Ironman or a 70.3, whatever it is, sprint, I don't care. It's kind of like if you make a mistake, you got to learn from those. But you've always got to evolve and understand. Like the best thing you could do is doing like a 10 mile. You could go out and ride your own 10 mile time trial. Do it the way that you've always done it. Then think about some of the concepts that I've told you today. Like
Mm.
pace it differently and then see what the time brings. And I'll guarantee you that if you do it how I tell you, that you'll ride faster. It works every time.
Mm.
If you want to fight it, then no, it's not going to work. But generally, it always works. It's a winning formula. And if you want to argue me about like, like aeros more efficiently in the headwind, and the science says that, yeah, yeah, I'm not going to argue with you because I know that I'm right. But it's kind of like bring those principles in, and then you'll go quicker.
Mm.
Uh,
So if people want to follow your work or schedule you in, I mean, you've got a YouTube channel now, which has got some good stuff
yeah,
on there. You've got a lot of good content, and then I guess Matt Bottrill Performance Coaching is your website if people want to follow along.
Yeah. Just Google Matt Bottrill, or something will come up.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully it's good.
Well, thanks
Yeah.
so much for sharing today. And this has been fantastic. You can feel the passion, the experience, the knowledge come through, and I think there's a lot of real practical takeaways that hard fought through all of your experience over the years to distill down to such a simple message.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm just passionate about like what I do, and I really want to help people. So yeah, thanks for your time, and
Well, thank you.
yeah, we'll carry on smashing it.
All right. Well, we'll get to work on this Roth plan first for Vince and some others, and away we go.
Sounds like a plan.
All right. Thanks very much, Matt.
No worries.
So that was a great conversation with Matt Bottrill of Matt Bottrill Performance Coaching. You can follow Matt on his YouTube channel, on his socials, where he's sharing tips and tricks from his bike fitting, aerodynamics, and coaching operation. And we'll link to those in the show notes. Reminder, you can support the podcast, sign up on Substack, like and comment and share if you found this useful.